How badly were you hurt back there? Joe pressed as Mark and Joshua gathered around. Just knocked on my ass, she said. Bruised a little. Rose minus. I'm okay, Joe. It's just all this running, all those damn stairs up from the beach. I guess I'm not in as good a shape as I should be. Joshua was talking sotto voce on the cell phone again. Let's go, Rose said. Come on, let's go. Beyond the bluff, above the beach, the helicopter was almost past the estate. Mark led the way again, and Rose followed with renewed energy. They dashed under the roof of the arched loggia against the rear wall, where they were no longer in any danger of being spotted by the chopper pilots, and then to the corner of the house. As they moved single file along the side of the mansion on a walkway that serpented through a small grove of shaggy-barked melaleucas, they were abruptly pinned in the bright beam of a big flashlight. Blocking the path ahead of them, a watchman said, Hey, who the hell are minus acting without hesitation? Mark began to move even as the beam flicked on. The stranger was still speaking when Mark collided with him. The two men grunted from the impact. The flashlight flew against the trunk of a melaleuca, rebounded onto the walkway, and spun on the stone, making shadows whirl like a pack of tail-chasing dogs. Mark swiveled the startled watchman around, put a hammerlock on him, bum-rushed him off the sidewalk and through bordering flower beds, and slammed him against the side of the house, so hard that the nearby windows rattled. Scooping up the flashlight, Joshua directed it on the action, and Joe saw that they had been challenged by an overweight, uniformed security guard of about 55. Mark pressed him to his knees, and kept a hand on the back of his head to force his face down and away from them, so he couldn't describe them later. He's not armed, Mark informed Joshua. Bastards, the watchman said bitterly. Ankle holster. Joshua wondered. Not that either. The watchman said, stupid owners are pacifists or some damn thing. Won't have a gun on the place, even for me. So now here I am. We're not going to hurt you, Mark said, pulling him backwards from the house and forcing him to sit on the ground with his back against the trunk of a melaleuca. You don't scare me, the watchman said, but he sounded scared. Dogs? Mark demanded. Everywhere, the guard said. Dobermans. He's lying, Mark said confidently. Even Joe could hear the bluff in the watchman's voice. Joshua gave the flashlight to Joe and said, keep it pointed at the ground. Then he produced handcuffs from a fanny pack. Mark directed the guard to reach in back of himself, and clasp his hands behind the tree. The trunk was only about 10 inches in diameter, so the guard didn't have to contort himself, and Joshua snapped the cuffs on his wrists. The cops are on the way, the watchman gloated. No doubt riding Dobermans, Mark said. Bastard, said the watchman. From his fanny pack, Mark withdrew a tightly rolled ace bandaga. Bite on this, he told the guard. Bite on this, the guard said, indulging in one last bleat of hopeless bravado, and then he did as he was told. 3 times, Joshua wound electrician's tape around the guard's head and across his mouth, fixing the ace bandage firmly in place. From the watchman's belt, Mark unclipped what appeared to be a remote control. This opened the driveway gate. Through his gag, the watchman snarled something obscene, which issued as a meaningless mumble. Probably the gate. To the guard, Joshua said, just relax. Don't chafe your wrists. We're not robbing the place. We're really not. We're only passing through. Mark said, when we've been gone half an hour, we'll call the cops so they can come and release you. Better get a dog, Joshua advised. Taking the watchman's flashlight, Mark led them toward the front of the house. The confrontation had occurred and been successfully resolved, with aplomb and with as little injury to the watchman as possible, in slightly more than 1 minute. Whoever these guys were, Joe was glad that they were on his side. The estate occupied at least 3 acres. The huge house was set 200 feet back from the front property wall at the street. In the eye of the wide, looping driveway was a 4-tier marble fountain, 4 broad scallop bowls, each supported by 3 leaping dolphins, bowls and dolphins diminishing in scale as they ascended. The bowls were full of water, but the pump was silent, and there were no spouts or cascades. "We'll wait here," Mark said, leading them to the dolphins. The dolphins and bowls rose out of a pool with a 2-foot-high wall finished with a broad cap of limestone. Rose sat on the edge. And then so did Joe and Mark. Taking the remote control they had gotten from the watchman, Joshua walked along the driveway toward the entrance gate, talking on the cellular phone as he went. Dogs of warm Santa Ana wind chase cat quick leaves and curls of papery melaleuca bark along the blacktop. "How do you even know about me?" Rose asked Mark. "When any enterprise is launched with a $1 billion trust fund, like ours," Mark said, "it sure doesn't take long to get up to speed. Besides, computers and data technology are what we're about." "What enterprise?" Joe asked. The answer was the same mystifying response that Joshua had given on the beach in Finna Face. "And what's that mean?" "Later," Joe Rose promised. "Go on, Mark." "Well, so, from day one, we've had the funds to try to keep track of all promising research in every discipline, worldwide, that could conceivably lead to the epiphany we expect." "Maybe so," Rose said. "But you people have been around 2 years, while the largest part of my research for the past 7 years has been conducted under the tightest imaginable security. Doctor, you showed enormous promise in your field until you were about 37, and then suddenly your work appeared to come almost to a complete halt except for a minor paper published here or there from time to time. You were a Niagara of creativity and then went dry overnight. And that indicates what to you?" "It's the signature pattern of a scientist who's been co-opted by the defense establishment or some other branch of government with sufficient power to enforce a total information blackout. So when we see something like that, we start trying to find out exactly where you're at work. Finally we located you at Tenologic, but not at any of their well-known and accessible facilities. A deep subterranean, biologically secure complex near Manassas, Virginia. Something called Project 99. While he listened intently to the conversation, Joe watched as out at the end of the long driveway, the ornate electric gate rolled aside. "How much do you know about what we do on Project 99? Rose asked. "Not enough," Mark said. "How can you know anything at all?" "When I say we track ongoing research worldwide, I don't mean that we limit ourselves to the same publications and shared data banks that any science library has available to it." With no animosity, Rose said, "That's a nice way of saying you try to penetrate computer security systems, hack your way in, break encryptions. Whatever. We don't do it for profit. We don't economically exploit the information we acquire. It's simply our mission, the search we were created to undertake." Joe was surprised by his own patience. Although he was learning things by listening to them talk, the basic mystery only grew deeper. Yet he was prepared to wait for answers. The bizarre experience with the Polaroid snapshot in the banquet room had left him shaken. Now that he'd had time to think about what had happened, the synesthesia seemed to be but prelude to some revelation that was going to be more shattering and humbling than he had previously imagined. He remained committed to learning the truth, but now instinct warned him that he should allow the revelations to wash over him in small waves, instead of in one devastating tsunami. Joshua had gone through the open gate and was standing along the Pacific Coast Highway. Over the eastern hills, the swollen moon ascended yellow-orange, and the warm wind seemed to blow down out of it. Mark said, "You were one of thousands of researchers, whose work we followed, though you were of somewhat special interest because of the extreme secrecy at Project 99. Then, a year ago, you left Manassas with something from the project, and overnight you were the most wanted person in the country. Even after you supposedly died aboard that airliner in Colorado. Even then, people were looking for you, lots of people, expending considerable resources, searching frantically for a dead woman, which seemed pretty weird to us." Rose said nothing to encourage him. She seemed tired. Joe took her hand. She was trembling, but she squeezed his hand as if to assure him that she was all right. "Then we began to intercept reports from a certain clandestine police agency. Reports that said you were alive and active in the LA area, that it involved families who'd lost loved ones on Flight 353. We set up some surveillance of our own. We're pretty good at it. Some of us are ex-military. Anyway, you could say we watched the watchers who were keeping tab on people like Joe here. And now, I guess it's a good thing we did." "Yes, thank you," she said. "But you don't know what you're getting into here. There's not just glory. There's terrible danger." "Dr. Tucker," Mark persisted, "there are over 9,000 of us now, and we've committed our lives to what we do. We're not afraid. And now we believe that you may have found the interface and that it's very different from anything we quite anticipated. If you've actually made that breakthrough. If humanity is at that pivot point in history when everything is going to change radically and forever, then we are your natural allies." "I think you are," she agreed. Gently but persistently selling her on this alliance, Mark said, "Doctor, we both have set ourselves against those forces of ignorance and fear and self-interest that want to keep the world in darkness. Remember, I once worked for them?" But turned. A car swung off Pacific Coast Highway and paused to pick up Joshua. It was followed through the gate and along the driveway by a second car. Rose, Mark, and Joe got to their feet as the two vehicles, a Ford trailed by a Mercedes, circled the fountain and stopped in front of them. Joshua stepped from the passenger door of the Ford, and a young brunette woman got out from behind the steering wheel. The Mercedes was driven by an Asian man of about 30. They all gathered before Rose Tucker, and for a moment everyone stood in silence. The steadily escalating wind no longer spoke merely through the rustling foliage of the trees, through the cricket-rasping branches of the shrubbery, and through the hollow flutelic music issuing from the eaves of the mansion, for now it also enjoyed a voice of its own. A haunted keening that curled chillingly in listening ears, akin to the muted but frightful ululent crying of coyote packs chasing down prey in some far canyon of the night. In the landscape lights, the shuddering greenery cast nervous shadows, and the gradually paling moon gazed at itself in the shiny surfaces of the automobile. Watching these four people as they watched Rose, Joe realized that they regarded the scientists not solely with curiosity, but with wonder, perhaps even with awe, as though they stood in the presence of someone transcendent, someone holy. "I'm surprised to see every one of you in mufti," Rose said. They smiled, and Joshua said, 2 years ago, when we first set out on this mission, we were reasonably quiet about it. Didn't want to excite a lot of media interest, because we thought we'd largely be misunderstood. What we didn't expect was that we'd have enemies. And enemies so violent, so powerful, Mark said. We thought everyone would want to know the answers we were seeking if we ever found them. Now we know better. Ignorance is a bliss that some people will kill for, said the young woman. So a year ago, Joshua continued, we adopted the robes as a distraction. People understand us as a cult or think they do. We're more acceptable when we're viewed as fanatics, neatly labeled and confined to a box. We don't make people quite so nervous. Robes. Astonished, Joe said, "You wear blue robes, shave your heads." Joshua said, "Some of us do, yes, as of a year ago, and those in the uniform pretend to be the entire membership. That's what I meant when I said the robes are a distraction, the robes, the shaved heads, the earrings, the visible communal enclaves. The rest of us have gone underground, where we can do the work without being spied on, subjected to harassment, and easily infiltrated. Come with us," the young woman said to Rose. "We know you may have found the way, and we want to help you bring it to the world without interference." Rose moved to her and put a hand against her cheek, much as she had touched Joe in the cemetery. "I might be with you soon, but not tonight. I need more time to think, to plan. And I'm in a hurry to see a young girl, a child, who is at the center of what is happening." Nina, Joe thought, and his heart shuddered like the shadows of the wind-shaken trees. Rose moved to the Asian man and touched him too. "I can tell you this much. We stand on the threshold you foresaw. We will go through that door, maybe not tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or next week, but in the years ahead." She went to Joshua. "Together we will see the world change forever, bring the light of knowledge into the great dark loneliness of human existence. In our time." And finally she approached Mark. "I assume you brought 2 cars, because you were prepared to give one to Joe and me." "Yes. But we hoped minus." She put a hand on his arm. "Soon, but not tonight. I've got urgent business, Mark. Everything we hope to achieve hangs in the balance right now, hangs so precariously until I can reach the little girl I mentioned. Wherever she is, we can take you to her?" "No. Joe and I must do this alone and quickly. You can take the Ford." "Thank you." Mark withdrew a folded $1 bill from his pocket and gave it to Rose. "There are just 8 digits in the serial number on this bill. Ignore the 4th digit, and the other 7 are a phone number in the 310 area code." Rose tucked the bill into her jeans. "When you're ready to join us," Mark said, "or if you're ever in trouble you can't get out of, ask for me at that number. We'll come for you no matter where you are." She kissed him on the cheek. "We've got to go." She turned to Joe. "Will you drive?" "Yes." To Joshua, she said, "May I take your cell phone?" He gave it to her. Wings of furious wind beat around them as they got into the Ford. The keys were in the ignition. As Rose pulled the car door shut, she said, "Oh, Jesus," and leaned forward, gasping for breath. "You are hurt." "Told you. I got knocked around." "Where's it hurt?" "We've got to get across the city," Rose said, "but I don't want to go back past Mahalia's. You could have a broken rib or 2. Ignoring him, she sat up straight, and her breathing improved as she said, "The creeps won't want to risk setting up a roadblock and a traffic check without cooperation from the local authorities, and they don't have time to get that. But you can bet your ass they'll be watching passing cars. If you've got a broken rib, it could puncture a lung." "Joe, damn it, we don't have time. We've got to move if we're going to keep our girl alive." He stared at her. "Nina." She met his eyes. She said, "Nina," but then a fearful look came into her face, and she turned from him. "We can head north from here on PCH, he said, "then inland on Canaan Dune Road. That's a county route up to Algora Hills. There we can get the 101 east to the 210. Go for it." Faces powdered by moonlight, hair wind-tossed, the 4 who would leave in the Mercedes stood watching, backdropped by leaping stone dolphins and thrashing trees. This tableau struck Joe as both exhilarating and ominous, and he could not identify the basis of either perception, other than to admit that the night was charged with an uncanny power that was beyond his understanding. Everything his gaze fell upon seemed to have monumental significance, as if he were in a state of heightened consciousness, and even the moon appeared different from any moon that he had ever seen before. As Joe put the Ford in gear and began to pull away from the fountain, the young woman came forward to place her hand against the window, beside Rose Tucker's face. On this side of the glass, Rose matched her palm to the other. The young woman was crying, her lovely face glimmering with moonbright tears, and she moved with the car along the driveway, hurrying as it picked up speed, matching her hand to Rose's all the way to the gate before at last pulling back. Joe felt almost as if somewhere earlier in the night, he had stood before a mirror of madness and, closing his eyes, had passed through his own reflection into lunacy. Yet he did not want to return through the silvered surface to that old gray world. This was a lunacy that he found increasingly agreeable, perhaps because it offered him the one thing he desired most and could find only on this side of the looking-glass hope. Slumped in the passenger seat beside him, Rose Tucker said, "Maybe all this is more than I can handle, Joe. I'm so tired and so scared. I'm nobody special enough to do what needs done, not nearly special enough to carry a weight like this." "You seem pretty special to me," he said. "I'm going to screw it up," she said as she entered a phone number on the keypad of the cellular phone. "I'm scared shitless that I'm not going to be strong enough to open that door and take us all through it." She pushed the send button. "Show me the door, tell me where it goes, and I'll help you," he said, wishing she would stop speaking in metaphors and give him the hard facts. Why is Nina so important to whatever's happening? Where is she, Rose? Someone answered the cellular call, and Rose said, "It's me." "Move Nina. Move her now. Nina." Rose listened for a moment, but then said firmly, "No, now, move her right now, in the next 5 minutes, even sooner if you can. They linked Mahalia to me." "Yeah, and in spite of all the precautions we'd taken. It's only a matter of time, now and not very much time until they make the connection to you. Nina." Joe turned off the Pacific Coast Highway onto the county road to Augura Hills, driving up through a rumpled bed of dark land from which the Santa Ana wind flung sheets of pale dust. "Take her to Big Bear," Rose told the person on the phone. Big Bear. Since Joe had talked to Mercy Ealing in Colorado, could it be less than 9 hours ago? Nina had been back in the world, miraculously returned, but in some corner where he could not find her. Soon, however, she would be in the town of Big Bear on the shores of Big Bear Lake, a resort in the nearby San Bernardino Mountains, a place he knew well. Her return was more real to him now that she was in a place that he could name, the byways of which he had walked, and he was flooded with such sweet anticipation that he wanted to shout to relieve the pressure of it. He kept his silence, however, and he rolled the name between the fingers of his mind, rolled it over and over, as if it were a shiny coin. Big Bear. Rose spoke into the phone, "If I can. I'm going to be there in a couple of hours. I love you. Go. Go now." She terminated the call, put the phone on the seat between her legs, closed her eyes, and leaned against the door. Joe realized that she was not making much use of her left hand. It was curled in her lap. Even in the dim light from the instrument panel, he could see that her hand was shaking uncontrollably. "What's wrong with your arm?" "Give it a rest, Joe. It's sweet of you to be concerned, but you're getting to be a nag. I'll be fine once we get to Nina." He was silent for half a mile. "Then, tell me everything. I deserve to know." "You do, yes. It's not a long story. But where do I begin?" 4. Great bristling balls of tumbleweed, robbed of their green by the merciless western sun, cracked from their roots by the withering dryness of the California summer, torn from their homes in the earth by the shrieking Santa Ana wind, now bounded out of the steep canyons and across the narrow highway, silver gray in the headlights, a curiously melancholy sight, families of thistled skeletons like starved and harried refugees fleeing worse torment. Joe said, "Start with those people back there. What kind of cult are they?" She spelled it for him in Finiface. "It's a made word," she said, "shorthand for interface with the infinite. And they're not a cult, not in any sense, you mean it. Then what are they?" Instead of answering immediately, she shifted in her seat, trying to get more comfortable. Checking her wristwatch, she said, "Can you drive faster?" "Not on this road. In fact, better put on your safety belt." "Not with my left side feeling like it does." Having adjusted her position, she said, "You know the name Lauren Pollock. The software genius. The poor man's Bill Gates." "That's what the press sometimes calls him, yes. But I don't think the word poor should be associated with someone who started from scratch and made $7 billion by the age of 42. Maybe not." She closed her eyes and slumped against the door, supporting her weight on her right side. Sweat beaded her brow, but her voice was strong. 2 years ago, Lauren Pollock used $1 billion of his money to form a charitable trust. Named it Infiniface. He believes many of the sciences, through research facilitated by new generations of super-fast computers, are approaching discoveries that will bring us face to face with the reality of a creator. Sounds like a cult to me. Oh, plenty of people think Pollock is a flake. But he's got a singular ability to grasp complex research from a wide variety of sciences, and he has vision. You know, there's a whole movement of modern physics that sees evidence of a created universe. Frowning, Joe said, "What about chaos theory? I thought that was the big thing." Chaos theory doesn't say the universe is random and chaotic. It's an extremely broad theory that, among many other things, notes strangely complex relationships in apparently chaotic systems like the weather. Look deeply enough in any chaos, and you find hidden regularities. Actually, he admitted, "I don't know a damn thing about it, just the way they use the term in the movies. Most movies are stupidity machines like politicians." So, if Pollock was here, he'd tell you that just 80 years ago, science mocked religion's assertion that the universe was created ex nihilo, out of nothing. Everyone knew something couldn't be created from nothing, a violation of all the laws of physics. Now we understand more about molecular structure, and particle physicists create matter ex nihilo all the time. Inhaling with a hiss through clenched teeth, she leaned forward, popped open the glove box, and rummaged through its contents. "I was hoping for aspirin or Excedrin. I'd chew them dry. We could stop somewhere minus." "No. Drive. Just drive. Big Bear's so far." She closed the glove box but remained sitting forward, as though that position gave her relief. Anyway, physics and biology are the disciplines that most fascinate Pollock, especially molecular biology. Why molecular biology? Because the more we understand living things on a molecular level, the clearer it becomes that everything is intelligently designed. You, me, mammals, fish, insects, plants, everything. Wait a second. Are you tossing away evolution here? Not entirely. Wherever molecular biology takes us, there might still be a place for Darwin's theory of evolution in some form. You're not one of those strict fundamentalists who believes we were created exactly 5,000 years ago in the Garden of Eden. Hardly. But Darwin's theory was put forth in 1859, before we had any knowledge of atomic structure. He thought the smallest unit of a living creature was the cell, which he saw as just a lump of adaptable albumin. Albumin. You're losing me. The origin of this basic living matter, he thought, was most likely an accident of chemistry, and the origin of all species was explained through evolution. But we now know cells are enormously complex structures of such clockwork design that it's impossible to believe they are accidental in nature. We do. I guess I've been out of school a long time. Even in the matter of the species. Well, the two axioms of Darwinian theory, the continuity of nature and adaptable design, have never been validated by a single empirical discovery in nearly 150 years. Now you have lost me. Let me put it another way. She still leaned forward, staring out at the dark hills and the steadily rising glow of the sprawling suburbs beyond. Do you know who Francis Crick is? No. He's a molecular biologist. In 1962, he shared the Nobel Prize in Medicine with Maurice Wilkins and James Watson for discovering the three-dimensional molecular structure of DNA, the double helix. Every advancement in genetics since then and the countless revolutionary cures for diseases we're going to see over the next 20 years spring directly from the work of Francis Crick and his colleagues. Crick is a scientist, Joe, to no degree a spiritualist or mystic. But do you know what he suggested a few years ago? That life on Earth may well have been designed by an extraterrestrial intelligence. Even highbrows read the National Enquirer, huh? The point is, Crick was unable to square what we now know of molecular biology's complexity with the theory of natural selection, but he was unwilling to suggest a creator in any spiritual sense. So, enter the ever-popular godlike aliens. But it totally begs the issue, you see. Even if every form of life on this planet was designed by extraterrestrials, who designed them? It's the chicken or the egg, all over again. She laughed softly, but the laughter mutated into a cough that she couldn't easily suppress. She eased back, leaning against the door, once more, and glared at him when he tried to suggest that she needed medical attention. When she regained her breath, she said, Lauren Pollock believes the purpose of human intellectual striving, the purpose of science, is to increase our understanding of the universe, not just to give us better physical control of our environment or to satisfy curiosity, but to solve the puzzle of existence God has put before us. And by solving it, to become like gods ourselves. She smiled through her pain. Now you're tuned to the Pollock frequency. Pollock thinks we're living in the time when some key scientific breakthrough will prove there is a creator. Something that is an interface with the infinite. This will bring the soul back to science, lifting humanity out of its fear and doubt, healing our divisions and hatreds, finally uniting our species on one quest that's both of the spirit and the mind. Like Star Trek. Don't make me laugh again, Joe. It hurts too much. Joe thought of Jem Fiddish, the used car dealer. Both Pollock and Fiddish sensed an approaching end to the world as they knew it, but the oncoming tidal wave that Fiddish perceived was dark and cold and obliterating, while Pollock foresaw a wave of purest light. So Pollock, she said, founded Infiniface to facilitate this quest, to track research worldwide with an eye toward projects with metaphysical aspects that the scientists themselves might not recognize, to ensure that key discoveries were shared among researchers, to encourage specific projects that seem to be leading to a breakthrough of the sort Pollock predicts. Infiniface isn't a religion at all. No. Pollock thinks all religions are valid to the extent that they recognize the existence of a created universe and a creator, but then they bog down in elaborate interpretations of what God expects of us. What's wanted of us, in Pollock's view, is to work together, to learn, to understand, to peel the layers of the universe, to find God, and in the process to become His equals. By now they were out of the dark hills and into suburbs again. Ahead was the entrance to the freeway that would take them east across the city. As he drove up the ramp, heading toward Glendale and Pasadena, Joe said, "I don't believe in anything." "I know. No loving God would allow such suffering. Pollock would say that the fallacy of your thinking lies in its narrow human perspective. Maybe Pollock is full of shit." Whether Rose began to laugh again, or fell directly victim to the cough, Joe couldn't tell, but she needed even longer than before to regain control of herself. "You need to see a doctor," he insisted. She was adamantly opposed. "Any delay. And Nina's dead. Don't make me choose between minus. There is no choice. That's my point. If it's me or Nina, then she comes first. Because she's the future. She's the hope." Orange-faced on first appearance, the moon had lost its blush and, stage fright behind it, had put on the stark white face of a smugly amused mime. Sunday night traffic on the moon-mocked freeway was heavy as Angelinos returned from Vegas and other points in the desert, while desert dwellers streamed in the opposite direction, returning from the city and its beaches, ceaselessly restless, these multitudes, always seeking a greater happiness and often finding it, but only for a weekend or an afternoon. Joe drove as fast and as recklessly as he dared, weaving from lane to lane, but keeping in mind that they could not risk being stopped by the highway patrol. The car wasn't registered in either his name or Rose's. Even if they could prove it had been loaned to them, they would lose valuable time in the process. "What is Project 99? He asked her. "What the hell are they doing in that subterranean facility outside Manassas?" "You've heard about the Human Genome Project?" "Yeah. Cover of Newsweek. As I understand it, they're figuring out what each human gene controls. The greatest scientific undertaking of our age," Rose said. "Mapping all 100,000 human genes and detailing the DNA alphabet of each. And they're making incredibly fast progress. Find out how to cure muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis minus cancer, everything given time." "You're part of that?" "No. Not directly. At Project 99. We have a more exotic assignment. We're looking for those genes that seem to be associated with unusual talents." "What, like Mozart or Rembrandt or Michael Jordan?" "No. Not creative or athletic talents. Paranormal talents. Telepathy. Telekinesis. Pyrokinesis. It's a long, strange list." His immediate reaction was that of a crime reporter, not of a man who had recently seen the fantastic in action, but there aren't such talents. That's science fiction. There are people who score far higher than chance on a variety of tests designed to disclose psychic abilities. Card prediction. Calling coin tosses. Thought image transmission. That stuff they used to do at Duke University. That and more. When we find people who perform exceptionally well in these tests, we take blood samples from them. We study their genetic structure. Or children in poltergeist situations. Poltergeists. Poltergeist phenomena. Weeding out the hoaxes aren't really ghosts. There's always one or more children in houses where this happens. We think the objects flying around the room and the ectoplasmic apparitions are caused by these children, by their unconscious exercise of powers they don't even know they have. We take samples from these kids when we can find them. We're building a library of unusual genetic profiles, looking for common patterns among people who have had all manner of paranormal experiences. And have you found something?" She was silent, perhaps waiting for another spasm of pain to pass, though her face revealed more mental anguish than physical suffering. At last she said, "Quite a lot, yes. If there had been enough light for Joe to see his reflection in the rear-view mirror, he knew that he could have watched as his tan faded and his face turned as white as the moon, for he suddenly knew the essence of what Project 99 was all about. You haven't just studied this. Not just. No. You've applied the research. Yes. How many work on Project 99? Over 200 of us. Making monsters, he said numbly. People, she said. Making people in a lab. They may look like people, but some of them are monsters. She was silent for perhaps a mile. Then she said, yes. And after another silence, though the true monsters are those of us who made them. Fenced and patrolled, identified at the highway as a think tank called the Quartermass Institute. The property encompasses 800 acres in the Virginia countryside, meadowed hills where deer graze, hushed woods of birch and beaches where a plenitude of small game thrives beyond the rifle reach of hunters, ponds with ducks, and grassy fields with nesting plovers. Although security appears to be minimal, no animal larger than a rabbit moves across these acres without being monitored by motion detectors, heat sensors, microphones, and cameras, which feed a continuous river of data to a Cray computer for continuous analysis. Unauthorized visitors are subject to immediate arrest and, on those rare occasions when hunters or adventurous teenagers scale the fence, they are halted and taken into custody within 500 feet of the point of intrusion. Near the geographical center of these peaceful acres is the orphanage, a cheerless 3-story, brick structure that resembles a hospital. 48 children currently reside herein, every one below the age of 6. Though some appear older. They are all residents by virtue of having been born without mothers or fathers in any but the chemical sense. None of them was conceived in love, and none entered the world through a woman's womb. As fetuses, they were nurtured in mechanical wombs, adrift in amniotic fluid brewed in a laboratory. As with laboratory rats and monkeys, as with dogs whose skulls are cut open and brains exposed for days during experiments related to the central nervous system, as with all animals that further the cause of knowledge, these orphans have no names. To name them would be to encourage their handlers to develop emotional attachments to them. The handlers, which includes everyone from those security men who double as cooks to the scientists who bring these children into the world, must remain morally neutral and emotionally detached in order to do their work properly. Consequently, the children are known by letter and number codes that refer to the specific indices in Project 99's genetic profile, library from which their special abilities were selected. Here on the 3rd floor, southwest corner, in a room of her own, sits Atex 12-23. She is 4 years old, catatonic, and incontinent. She waits in her crib, in her own wastes until her nurse changes her, and she never complains. Atex 12-23 has never spoken a single word or uttered any sound whatsoever. As an infant, she never cried. She cannot walk. She sits motionlessly, staring into the middle distance, sometimes drooling. Her muscles are partially atrophied, even though she is given manipulated exercise 3 times a week. If her face were ever to be enlivened by expression, she might be beautiful, but the unrelieved slackness of her features gives her a chilling aspect. Cameras cover every inch of her room and record around the clock, which might seem to be a waste of videotape except that, from time to time, inanimate objects around Atex 12-23 become animated. Rubber balls of various colors levitate and spin in the air, float from wall to wall, or circle the child's head for 10 or 20 minutes at a time. Window blinds raise and lower without a hand touching them. Lights dim and flare, the digital clock speeds through the hours, and a teddy bear that she has never touched sometimes walks around the room on its stubby legs as if it contains the mechanical system that would allow it to do so. Now, come here, down to the second floor, to the third room east of the elevators, where lives a 5-year-old male, KSB 22-09, who is neither physically nor mentally impaired. Indeed, he is an active red-headed boy with a genius-level IQ. He loves to learn, receives extensive tutoring daily, and is currently educated to a 9th grade equivalent. He has numerous toys, books, and movies on video, and he participates in supervised play sessions with the other orphans because it is deemed essential by the project architects that all subjects with normal mental faculties and full physical abilities be raised in as social an atmosphere as possible, given the limitations of the institute. Sometimes when he tries hard, and sometimes when he is not trying at all, KSB 22-09 is able to make small objects, pencils, ball bearings, paper clips, thus far nothing larger than a glass of water vanish. Simply vanish. He sends them elsewhere, into what he calls the all-dark. He is not able to bring them back and cannot explain what the all-dark may be, though. He does not like the place. He must be sedated to sleep, because he frequently suffers vivid nightmares, in which he uncontrollably sends himself, piece by piece, into the all-dark, first a thumb, and then a toe, and then his left foot, a tooth and another tooth, one eye gone from a suddenly empty socket, and then an ear. Lately, KSB 22-09 is experiencing memory lapses and spells of paranoia, which are thought to be related to the long-term use of the sedative that he receives before bed each night. Of the 48 orphans residing at the institute, only 7 exhibit any paranormal powers. The other 41, however, are not regarded as failures. Each of the 7 successes first revealed his or her talent at a different age, one as young as 11 months, one as old as 5. Consequently, the possibility remains that many of the 41 will blossom in years to come, perhaps not until they experience the dramatic changes in body chemistry related to puberty. Eventually, of course, those subjects who age without revealing any valuable talent will have to be removed from the program, as even Project 99's resources are not infinite. The project's architects have not yet determined the optimum point of termination. Although the steering wheel was hard under his hands and slick with his cold sweat, although the sound of the engine was familiar, although the freeway was solid under the spinning tires, Joe felt as if he had crossed into another dimension, as treacherously amorphous and inimical to reason as the surreal landscapes in Salvador Dali's paintings. As his horror grew, he interrupted Rose, "This place you're describing is hell. You couldn't have been part of anything like this. You're not that kind of person. Aren't I?" "No." Her voice grew thinner as she talked, as though the strength supporting her had been the secret she kept, and as she revealed them one by one, her vitality ebbed as it had for Samson lock by lock. In her increasing weariness was a sweet relief, like that dispensed in a confessional, a weakness that she seemed to embrace. But that was nonetheless colored by a gray wash of despair. "If I'm not that kind of person now, I must have been then. But how? Why would you want to be involved with these atrocities?" "Pride. To prove that I was as good as they thought I was, good enough to take on this unprecedented challenge. Excitement. The thrill of being involved with a program, even better funded than the Manhattan Project. Why did the people who invented the atomic bomb work on it? Knowing what they were making. Because others, elsewhere in the world, will do it if we don't. So maybe we have to do it to save ourselves from them." "Save ourselves by selling our souls?" he asked. "There's no defense I can offer that should ever exonerate me," Rose said. "But it is true that when I signed on, there was no consensus that we would carry the experiments this far, that we would apply what we learned with such zeal. We entered into the creation of the children in stages, down a slippery slope. We intended to monitor the first one just through the second trimester of the fetal stage and, after all, we don't consider a fetus to be an actual human being. So it wasn't like we were experimenting on a person. And when we brought one of them to full term, there were intriguing anomalies in its E-graphs, strangeness in its brainwave patterns that might have indicated heretofore unknown cerebral function. So we had to keep it alive to see what we had achieved, to see if maybe we had moved evolution forward, a giant step. Jesus. Though he had first met this woman only 36 hours ago, his feelings for her had been rich and intense, ranging from virtual adoration to fear, and now to repulsion. Yet from his repulsion came pity, because for the first time, he saw in her one of the many cloves of human weakness that, in other forms, were so ripe in himself. Fairly early on, she said, I did want out. So I was invited for a private chat with the project director, who made it clear to me that there was no quitting now. This had become a job with lifetime tenure. Even to attempt to leave Project 99 is to commit suicide and to put the lives of your loved ones at risk as well. But couldn't you have gone to the press, broken the story wide open, shut them down? Probably not without physical evidence, and all I had was what was in my head. Anyway, a couple of my colleagues had the idea that they could bring it all down, I think. One of them suffered a timely stroke. The other was shot 3 times in the head by a mugger who was never caught. For a while, I was so depressed. I considered killing myself and saving them the trouble. But then along came CC21-21. First, born 14 months ahead of CC21-21 was male subject SSW89-58. He exhibits prodigious talents in every regard and his story is of importance to you because of your own recent experiences with people who eviscerate themselves and set themselves afire and because of your losses in Colorado. By the time he is 42 months old, SSW 89-58 possesses the language skills of the average first-year college student and is able to read a 300-page volume in 1 to 3 hours, depending on the complexity of the text. Higher math comes to him as easily as eating ice cream, as do foreign languages from French to Japanese. His physical development proceeds at an accelerated rate, as well, and by the time he is 4, he stands as tall, and is proportionately developed as the average 7-year-old. Paranormal talents are anticipated, but researchers are surprised by 89-58's great breadth of more ordinary genius, which includes the ability to play any piece of piano music after hearing it once and by his physical precocity, for which no genetic selection has been made. When 89-58 begins to exhibit paranormal abilities, he proves to be phenomenally endowed. His first startling achievement is remote viewing. As a game, he describes to researchers the rooms in their own homes, where he has never visited. He walks them through tours of museums to which he has never been admitted. When he is shown a photograph of a Wyoming mountain, in which is buried a top-secret Strategic Air Command Defense Center, he describes in accurate detail the missile status display boards in the war room. He is considered an espionage asset of incalculable value until, fortunately by degrees, he discovers that he is able to step into a human mind as easily as he steps into distant rooms. He takes mental control of his primary handler, makes the man undress, and sends him through the halls of the orphanage, crowing like a rooster. When SSW 89-58 relinquishes control of the handler and it is discovered what he's done, he is punished severely. He resents the punishment, resents it deeply. That night he conducts a remote viewing of the handler's home and enters the handler's mind at a distance of 46 miles. Using the handler's body, he brutally murders the man's wife and daughter, and then he walks the handler through suicide. Subsequent to this episode, SSW-89-58 is subdued by the use of a massive dose of tranquilizers administered by a dart gun. 2 employees of Project 99 perish in this process. Thereafter, for a period of 18 days, he is maintained in a drug-induced coma, while a team of scientists designs and oversees the urgent construction of a suitable habitat for their prize, one which will sustain his life but assure that he remains controlled. A faction of the staff suggests immediate termination of SSW-89-58, but this advice is considered and rejected. Every endeavor is at some point troubled by pessimists. Here, now, come into the security room in the southeast corner of the first floor of the orphanage. In this place, if you are an employee, you must present yourself for the scrutiny of 3 guards, because this post is never manned by fewer, regardless of the hour. You must place your right hand on a scanner that will identify you by your fingerprints. You must peer into a retina scanner, as well, which will compare your retinal patterns to those recorded in the scan taken when you first accepted employment. From here you descend in an elevator past 5 subterranean levels, where much of the work of Project 99 is conducted. You are interested, however, in the 6th and lowest level, where you walk to the end of a long corridor and through a gray metal door. You stand in a plain room with simple institutional furnishings, with 3 security men, none of whom is interested in you. These men work 6-hour shifts to ensure that they remain alert not only to what is happening in this room and the next but to nuances in one another's behavior. One wall of this room features a large window that looks into the adjoining chamber. Frequently you will see Dr. Louis Blom or Dr. Keith Ramlock or both at work beyond this glass, for they are the designers of SSW-89-58 and oversee the exploration and the utilization of his gifts. When neither Dr. Blom nor Dr. Ramlock is present, at least 3 other members of their immediate staff are in attendance. SSW-89-58 is never left unsupervised. They were transitioning from Interstate 210 to Interstate 10 when Rose interrupted herself to say, "Joe, could you find an exit with a service station? I need to use a restroom." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just need a restroom. I hate to waste the time. I want to get to Big Bear as quick as we can. But I don't want to wet my pants either. No hurry. Just somewhere in the next few miles, okay?" "All right." She conducted him, once more, on her version of a remote viewing of Project 99 outside Manassas. "Onward, please, through the connecting door and into the final space, where stands the elaborate containment vessel in which 89-58 now lives in, barring any unforeseen and calamitous developments, in which he will spend the rest of his unnatural life. This is a tank that somewhat resembles the iron lungs which, in more primitive decades, were used to sustain victims of poliomyelitis. Nestled like a pecan in its shell, 89-58 is entirely enclosed, pressed between the mattress, soft tabs of a lubricated body mold that restricts all movement, including even the movement of each finger, limiting him to facial expressions and twitches which no one can see, anyway. He is supplied with bottled air directly through a nose clip from tanks outside of the containment vessel. Likewise, he is pierced by redundant intravenous drip lines, one in each arm and one in his left thigh, through which he receives life-sustaining nourishment, a balance of fluids, and a variety of drugs as his handlers see fit to administer them. He is permanently catheterized for the efficient elimination of waste. If any of these IV drips or other lifelines works loose or otherwise fails, an insistent alarm immediately alerts the handlers, and in spite of the existence of redundant systems, repairs are undertaken without delay. The researchers and their assistants conduct conversations as necessary with 89-58 through a speakerphone. The clamshell body mold in which he lies inside the steel tank is equipped with audio feed to both of his ears and a microphone over his mouth. The staff is able to reduce 89-58's words to a background whisper whenever they wish, but he does not enjoy an equivalent privilege to tune them out. A clever video feed allows images to be transmitted by glass fiber to a pair of lenses fitted to 89-58's sockets. Consequently, he can be shown photographs and, if necessary, the geographical coordinates of buildings and places in which he is required to conduct remote viewings. Sometimes he is shown photographs of individuals against whom it is desired that he take one form of action or another. During a remote viewing, 89-58 describes in vivid detail what he sees, in whatever far place they have sent him, and he dutifully answers questions that his handlers put to him. By monitoring his heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, brain waves, eyelid movements, and changes in the electrical conductivity of his skin, they are able to detect a lie with better than 99% accuracy. Furthermore, they test him from time to time by remoting him to places on which extensive, reliable intelligence has already been gathered. His answers are subsequently compared to the material currently in file. He has been known to be a bad boy. He is not trusted. When 89-58 is instructed to enter the mind of a specific person and either eliminate that individual, or use him to eliminate another, which is most often a foreign national, the assignment is referred to as a wet mission. This term is used partly because blood is spilled, but largely because 89-58 is plunged not into the comparative dryness of faraway rooms, but into the murky depths of a human mind. As he conducts a wet mission, 89-58 describes it to Dr. Blom or Dr. Ramlock, at least one of whom is always present during the event. After numerous such missions, Blom and Ramlock and their associates are adept at identifying deception, even before the polygraph signals trouble. For his handlers, video displays of electrical activity in 89-58's brain clearly define the activity in which he is engaged at every moment. When he is only remote viewing, the patterns are radically different from those that arise when he is engaged in wet work. If he is assigned only to observe some distant place and, while viewing, disobediently occupies the mind of someone in that remote location, either as an act of rebellion or sheerly for sport, this is known at once to his handlers. If SSW 89-58 refuses an instruction, exceeds the parameters of an assignment, or exhibits any other signs of rebellion, he can be punished in numerous ways. Electrical contacts in the body mold and in his catheter can be activated to deliver painful shocks to selected tender points head to foot, or over his entire skin surface. Piercing electronic squeals at excruciating volume may be blasted into his ears. Disgusting odors are easily introduced with his air supply. A variety of drugs are available to precipitate painful and terrifying physiological symptoms, such as violent muscle spasms and inflamed nerve sheaths, which pose no danger to the life of this valuable asset. Inducing claustrophobic panic by cutting off his air supply is also a simple, but effective disciplinary technique. If he is obedient, 89-58 can be rewarded in one of 5 ways. Although he receives his primary nutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals through IV drips, a feeding tube can be extruded from the body mold and between his lips to allow him to enjoy tasty liquids from Coca-Cola to apple juice to chocolate milk. Second, because he is a piano prodigy and takes great pleasure from music, he can be rewarded with anything from the Beatles to Beethoven. Third, entire movies can be transmitted to the lenses over his eyes, and from such an intimate perspective, he seems to be virtually in the middle of the cinematic experience. Fourth, he can receive mood-elevating drugs that make him as happy, in some ways, as any boy in the world. Fifth, and best of all, he is sometimes allowed to go remote viewing in places that he would like to experience, and during these glorious expeditions, guided by his own interests, he knows freedom or as much of it as he can imagine. Routinely, no fewer than 3 staff monitor the containment vessel and its occupant because 89-58 can control only one mind at a time. If any of the 3 were to turn suddenly violent or exhibit any unusual behavior, either of the other 2 could, with the flip of a switch, administer sufficient sedatives through the intravenous feeds to drop 89-58 into a virtually instant, deep, and powerless sleep. In the unlikely event that this should fail, a doomsday button follows the sedative with a lethal dose of nerve toxin that kills in 3 to 5 seconds. The 3 guards on the other side of the observation window have similar buttons available for use at their discretion. SSW 89-58 is not able to read minds. He is not a telepath. He can only repress the personality of the person he inhabits and take control of the physical plant. There is disagreement among the staff of Project 99 as to whether 89-58's lack of telepathic ability is a disappointment or a blessing. Furthermore, when sent on a wet mission, he must know where his target is located before being able to invade its mind. He cannot search at will across the populations of the world, but must be guided by his handlers who first locate his prey. Once shown an image of the building or vehicle in which the target can be found, and when that place is geographically sighted in his mind, he can act. Thus far, he is also limited to the walls of that structure and cannot effectively pursue a wanted mind beyond the boundaries that are initially established. No one knows why this limitation should exist, though theories abound. Perhaps it is because the invisible psychic self, being only a wave energy of some type, responds to open spaces in much the manner of heat contained in a hot stone. Placed in a cold room, it radiates outward, dissipating, dispersing itself, and cannot be conserved in a coherent form. He is able to practice remote viewing of outdoor locations, but only for short periods of time. This shortcoming frustrates 89-58 handlers, but they believe and hope that his abilities in this regard may improve with time. If you can bear to watch, the containment vessel is opened twice each week to allow the handlers to clean their asset. He is without fail deeply sedated for this procedure and remains connected to the doomsday button. He is given a thorough sponge bath, irritations of the skin are treated, the minimal solid waste that he produces is evacuated from the bowel, teeth are cleaned, eyes are examined for infection, and then are flushed with antibiotic, and other maintenance is performed. Although 89-58 receives daily, low-voltage electrical stimulation of his muscles to ensure a minimal life-sustaining mass, he resembles one of the starving children of any third-world country racked by drought and evil politics. He is as pale as any job on a mortician's table, withered, with elfin bones grown thin from lack of use, and when unconsciously, he curls his feeble fingers around the hands of ministering attendants. His grip is no stronger than that of a cradled newborn baby, struggling to hold fast to its mother's thumb. Sometimes, in this profound sedation, he murmurs wordlessly but forlornly, mules, and even weeps as if adrift in a soft, sad dream. At the Shell station, only 3 vehicles were at the self-service pumps. Tending to their cars, the motorists squinted and ducked their heads to keep wind-blown grit out of their eyes. The lighting was as bright as that on a movie set, and though Joe and Rose were not being sought by the type of police agency that would distribute their photographs to local television news programs, Joe preferred to stay out of the glare. He parked along the side of the building, near the restrooms, where huddled shadows survived. Joe was in emotional turmoil, felt slashed across the heart, because now he knew the exact cause of the catastrophic crash, knew the murderer's identity and the twisted details. The knowledge was like a scalpel that pared off what thin scabs had formed over his pain. His grief felt fresh, the loss more recent than it really was. He switched off the engine and sat speechless. I don't understand how the hell they found out I was on that flight, Rose said. I'd taken such precautions. But I knew when he remote viewed the passenger cabin, looking for us, because there was an odd dimming of lights, a problem with my wristwatch, a vague sense of a presence, signs I'd learned to read. I've met a National Transportation Safety Board investigator who's heard the tape from the cockpit voice recorder before it was destroyed in a convenient sound lab fire. This boy was inside the captain's head, Rose. I don't understand. Why didn't he take out just you? He had to get us both, that was his assignment, me and the girl, and while he could have nailed me without any problem, it wouldn't have been easy with her. Utterly baffled, Joe said, Nina. Why would they have been interested in her even then? She was just another passenger, wasn't she? I thought they were after her later because she survived with you. Rose would not meet his eyes. Get me the key to the women's restroom, Joe? Will you, please? Let me have a minute here. I'll tell you the rest of it on the way to Big Bear. He went into the sales room and got the key from the cashier. By the time he returned to the Ford, Rose had gotten out. She was leaning against a front fender, back turned and shoulders hunched to the whistling Santa Ana wind. Her left arm was curled against her breast, and her hand was still shaking. With her right hand, she pulled the lapels of her blazer together, as though the warm August wind felt cold to her. Would you unlock the door for me? She asked. He went to the women's room. By the time that he unlocked the door and switched on the light, Rose had arrived at his side. I'll be quick, she promised, and slipped past him. He had a glimpse of her face in that brightness, just before the door fell shut. She didn't look good. Instead of returning to the car, Joe leaned against the wall of the building, beside the lavatory door, to wait for her. According to nurses in asylums and psychiatric wards, a greater number of their most disturbed patients responded to the Santa Ana winds than ever reacted to the sight of a full moon, beyond a barred window. It wasn't simply the baleful sound, like the cries of an unearthly hunter and the unearthly beasts that it pursued, but also the subliminal alkaline scent of the desert and a queer electrical charge different from those that other less dry winds imparted to the air. Joe could understand why Rose might have pulled her blazer shut and huddled into it. This night had both the moon and the Santa Ana wind to spark of voodoo current in the spine, and a parentless boy, without a name, who lived in a coffin of steel and moved invisible through a world of potential victims oblivious to him. Are we recording? The boy had known about the cockpit voice recorder, and he'd left a cry for help on it. One of their names is Dr. Louis Blom. One of their names is Dr. Keith Ramlock. They're doing bad things to me. They're mean to me. Make them stop. Make them stop hurting me. Whatever else he was, sociopathic, psychotic, homicidal, he was also a child. A beast, an abomination, a terror, but also a child. He had not asked to be born, and if he was evil, they had made him so by failing to teach him any human values, by treating him as mere ordnance, by rewarding him for murder. Beast he was, but a pitiable beast, lost and alone, wandering in a maze of misery. Pitiable but formidable. And still out there, waiting to be told where he could find Rose Tucker and Nina. This is fun. The boy enjoyed the killing. Joe supposed it was even possible that his handlers had never instructed him to destroy everyone aboard Nationwide Flight 353, that he had done it as an act of rebellion and because he enjoyed it. Make them stop, or when I get the chance. When I get the chance, I'll kill everybody. Everybody. I will. I'll do it. I'll kill everybody, and I'll like it. Recalling those words from the transcript, Joe sensed that the boy had not been referring merely to the passengers on the doomed airliner. By then he had already made the decision to kill them all. He was speaking of some act more apocalyptic than 320 murders. What could he accomplish if provided with photographs and the geographical coordinates of not merely a missile tracking facility, but a complex of nuclear missile launch silos? Jesus, Joe whispered. Somewhere in the night, Nina waited. In the hands of a friend of Rose's, but inadequately protected. Vulnerable. Rose seemed to be taking a long time. Rapping on the restroom door, Joe called her name, but she did not respond. He hesitated, knocked again, and when she weakly called Joe, he pushed the door open. She was perched on the edge of the toilet seat. She had taken off her navy blazer and her white blouse, the latter lay blood-soaked on the sink. He hadn't realized she'd been bleeding. Darkness and the blazer had hidden the blood from him. As he stepped into the restroom, he saw that she had shaped a compress of sorts from a wad of wet paper towels. She was pressing it to her left pectoral muscle, above her breast. That one shot on the beach, he said numbly. You were hit. The bullet passed through, she said. There's an exit wound in back. Nice and clean. I haven't even bled all that much, and the pain is tolerable. So why am I getting weaker? Internal bleeding, he suggested, wincing as he looked at the exit wound in her back. I know anatomy, she said. I took the hit in just the right spot. Couldn't have picked it better. Shouldn't be any damage to major vessels. The round might have hit a bone and fragmented. The fragment maybe didn't come out, took a different track. I was so thirsty. Tried to drink some water from the faucet. Almost passed out when I bent over. This settles it, he said. His heart was racing. We've got to get you to a doctor. Get me to Nina. Rose, damn it, Minus. Nina can heal me, she said, and as she spoke, she looked guiltily away from him. Astonished, he said, heal you. Trust me. Nina can do what no doctor can, what no one else on earth can do. At that moment, on some level, he knew at least one of Rose Tucker's remaining secrets, but he could not allow himself to take out that dark pearl of knowledge and examine it. Help me get my blouse and blazer on, and let's go. Get me into Nina's hands. Her healing hands. Though half sick with worry, he did as she wanted. As he dressed her, he remembered how larger than life she had seemed in the cemetery Saturday morning. Now she was so small. Through a hot clawing wind that mimicked the songs of wolves, she leaned on him all the way back to the car. When he got her settled in the passenger seat, she asked if he would get her something to drink. From a vending machine in front of the station, he purchased a can of Pepsi and one of Orange Crush. She preferred the Crush, and he opened it for her. Before she accepted the drink, she gave him two things, the Polaroid photograph of his family's graves and the folded dollar bill on which the serial number, minus the fourth digit, provided the phone number, at which Markavelle and Finiface could be reached in an emergency. And before you start driving, I want to tell you how to find the cabin in Big Bear in case I can't hold on until we get there. Don't be silly. You'll make it. Listen, she said, and again she projected the charisma that commanded attention. He listened as she told him the way, and his familiarity with the Big Bear area was such that he didn't need to write down the directions. And as for Infiniface, she said, I trust them, and they are my natural allies and Nina's as Mark said. But I'm afraid they can be too easily infiltrated. That's why I wouldn't let them come with us tonight. But if we're not followed, then this car is clean, and maybe their security is good enough. If worst comes to worst and you don't know where to turn, they may be your best hope. His chest tightened and his throat thickened as she spoke, and finally he said, "I don't want to hear any more of this. I'll get you to Nina in time." Rose's right hand trembled now, and Joe was not certain that she could hold the orange crush. But she managed it, drinking thirstily. As he drove back onto the San Bernardino freeway, heading east, she said, "I've never meant to hurt you, Joe." "You haven't." "I've done a terrible thing, though." He glanced at her. He didn't dare ask what she had done. He kept that shiny black pearl of knowledge tucked deep in the purse of his mind. "Don't hate me too much." "I don't hate you at all. My motives were good. They haven't always been. Certainly weren't spotless when I went to work at Project 99. But my motives were good this time, Joe." Driving out of the light storm of Los Angeles and its suburbs, toward the mountain darkness, where Nina dwelled, Joe waited for Rose to tell him why he should hate her. "So, let me tell you," she said, "about the project's only true success." Ascend, now in the elevator from the little glimpse of hell at the bottom of those 6 subterranean levels, leaving the boy in his containment vessel, and come all the way up to the security room where the descent began. Farther still, to the southeast corner of the ground floor, where CC-21-21 resides. She was conceived without passion in the same month as 89-58, though she was the project, not of Doctors Blom and Ramlock, but of Rose Tucker. She is a lovely child, delicate, fair of face, with golden hair and amethyst eyes. Although the majority of the orphans living here are of average intelligence, CC-21-21 has an unusually high IQ, even higher perhaps than 89-58, and she loves to learn. She is a quiet girl, with much grace and natural charm, but for the first 3 years of her life, she exhibits no paranormal abilities. Then on a sunny May afternoon, when she is participating in a session of supervised play with other children on the orphanage lawn, she finds a sparrow with a broken wing and 1 torn eye. It lies in the grass beneath a tree, flopping weakly, and when she gathers it into her small hands, it becomes fearfully still. Crying, the girl hurries with the bird to the nearest handler, asking what can be done. The sparrow is now so weak, and so paralyzed by fear that it can only feebly work its beak and produces no sound whatsoever. The bird is dying, the handler sees nothing to be done, but the girl will not accept the sparrow's pending death. She sits on the ground, grips the bird gently in her left hand, and carefully strokes it with her right, singing softly to it a song about robin redbreast and in but a minute the sparrow is restored. The fractures in the wing knit firm again, and the torn eye heals into a bright, clear orb. The bird sings and flies. CC-21-21 becomes the center of a happy whirlwind of attention. Rose Tucker, who has been driven to the contemplation of suicide by the nightmare of Project 99, is as reborn as the bird, stepping back from the abyss into which she has been peering. For the next 15 months, 21-21's healing power is explored. At first it is an unreliable talent, which she cannot exercise at will, but month by wondrous month, she learns to summon and control her gift, until she can apply it whenever asked to do so. Those on Project 99 with medical problems are brought to a level of health they never expected to enjoy again. A select few politicians and military figures and members of their families suffering from life-threatening illnesses are brought secretly to the child to be healed. There are those in Project 99 who believe that 21-21 is their greatest asset, although others find 89-58, in spite of the considerable control problems that he poses, to be the most interesting and most valuable property in the long run. Now, look here, come forward in time to one rainy day in August, 15 months after the restoration of the injured sparrow. A staff geneticist named Amos has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest forms of the disease. While healing Amos with only a soft and lingering touch, the girl detects an illness in addition to the malignancy, this one not of a physical nature, but nonetheless debilitating. Perhaps because of what he has seen at Project 99, perhaps for numerous other reasons that have accumulated throughout his 50 years, Amos has decided that life is without purpose or meaning, that we have no destiny but the void, that we are only dust in the wind. This darkness in him is blacker than the cancer, and the girl heals this, as well, by the simple expediency of showing Amos the light of God, and the strange dimensional lattices of realms beyond our own. Once shown these things, Amos is so overcome with joy and awe that he cycles between laughter and weeping, and to the eyes of the others in the room, a researcher named Janice, another named Vincent, he seems to be seized by an alarming hysteria. When Amos urges the girl to bring Janice into the same light that she has shown to him, she gives the gift again. Janice, however, reacts differently from Amos. Humbled and frightened, she collapses in remorse. She claws at herself in regret for the way she has lived her life and in grief for those she has betrayed and harmed, and her anguish is frightening. Tumult. Rose is summoned. Janice and Amos are isolated for observation and evaluation. What has the girl done? What Amos tells them seems like the happy babbling of a harmlessly deranged man, but babbling nonetheless, and from one who was, but a few minutes ago, a scientist of serious if not brooding disposition. Baffled and concerned by the strikingly different reactions of Amos and Janice, the girl withdraws and becomes uncommunicative. Rose works in private with 21 to 21 for more than 2 hours before she finally begins to pry the astounding explanation from her. The child cannot understand why the revelation that she's brought to Amos and Janice would overwhelm them so completely, or why Janice's reaction is a mix of euphoria and self-flagellation. Having been born with a full awareness of her place and purpose in the universe, with an understanding of the ladder of destinies that she will climb through infinity, with the certain knowledge of life everlasting carried in her genes, she cannot ever fully grasp the shattering power of this revelation when she brings it to those who have spent their lives in the mud of doubt and the dust of despair. Expecting nothing more than that she is going to experience the psychic equivalent of a magic lantern show, a tour of a child's sweet fantasy of God, Rose asks to be shown. And is shown. And is forever changed. Because at the touch of the child's hand, she is open to the fullness of existence. What she experiences is beyond her powers to describe, and even as torrents of joy surge through her and wash away all the countless griefs and miseries of her life heretofore, she is flooded, as well, with terror, for she is aware not only of the promise of a bright eternity, but of expectations that she must strive to fulfill in all the days of life ahead of her in this world and in the worlds to come, expectations that frighten her because she is unsure that she can ever meet them. Like Janice, she is acutely aware of every mean act and unkindness and lie and betrayal of which she has ever been guilty, and she recognizes that she still has the capacity for selfishness, pettiness, and cruelty. She yearns to transcend her past even as she quakes at the fortitude required to do so. When the vision passes and she finds herself in the girl's room as before, she harbors no doubt that what she saw was real. Truth in its purest form, and not merely the child's delusion transmitted through psychic power. For almost half an hour, she cannot speak but sits shaking, her face buried in her hands. Gradually, she begins to realize the implications of what has happened here. There are basically two. First, if this revelation can be brought to the world, even to as many as the girl can touch, all that is now will pass away. Once one has seen, not taken on faith, but seen that there is life beyond, even if the nature of it remains profoundly mysterious and even as fearsome as it is glorious, then all that was once important seems insignificant. Avenues of wondrous possibilities abound where once there was a single alley through the darkness. The world as we know it ends. Second, there are those who will not welcome the end of the old order, who have taught themselves to thrive on power and on the pain and humiliation of others. Indeed, the world is full of them, and they will not want to receive the girl's gift. They will fear the girl and everything that she promises, and they will either sedate and isolate her in a containment vessel, or they will kill her. She is as gifted as any Messiah, but she is human. She can heal the wing of a broken bird and bring sight to its blinded eye. She can banish cancer from a disease-riddled man. But she is not an angel with a cloak of invulnerability. She is flesh and bone. Her precious power resides in the delicate tissues of her singular brain. If the magazine of a pistol is emptied into the back of her head, she will die like any other child, dead. She cannot heal herself. Although her soul will proceed into other realms, she will be lost to this troubled place that needs her. The world will not be changed, peace will not replace turmoil, and there will be no end to loneliness and despair. Rose quickly becomes convinced that the project's directors will opt for termination. The moment that they understand what this little girl is, they will kill her. Before nightfall, they will kill her. Certainly before midnight, they will kill her. They will not be willing to risk consigning her to a containment vessel. The boy possesses only the power of destruction, but 21 to 21 possesses the power of enlightenment, which is immeasurably the more dangerous of the two. They will shoot her down, soak her corpse with gasoline, set her remains afire, and later scatter her charred bones. Rose must act, and quickly. The girl must be spirited out of the orphanage and hidden before they can destroy her. Joe. Against a field of stars, as though at this moment erupting from the crust of the earth, the black mountain shouldered darkly across the horizon. Joe, I'm sorry. Her voice was frail. I'm so sorry. They were speeding north on State Highway 30, east of the city of San Bernardino, 50 miles from Big Bear. Joe, are you okay? He could not answer. Traffic was light. The road ascended into forests. Cottonwoods and pines shook in the wind. He could not answer. He could only drive. When you insisted on believing the little girl with me was your own Nina, I let you go on believing it. For whatever purpose, she was still deceiving him. He could not understand why she continued to hide the truth. She said, after they found us at the restaurant, I needed your help. Especially after I was shot, I needed you. But you hadn't opened your heart and mind to the photograph when I gave it to you. You were so fragile. I was afraid if you knew it really wasn't your Nina, you just stop. Fall apart. God forgive me, Joe, but I needed you. And now the girl needs you. Nina needed him. Not some girl born in a lab, with the power to transmit her curious fantasies to others and cloud the minds of the gullible. Nina needed him. Nina. If he could not trust Rose Tucker, was there anyone he could trust? He managed to shake 2 words from himself, go on. Rose again. In 21-21's room. Feverishly considering the problem of how to spirit the girl through a security system equal to that of any prison. The answer, when it comes, is obvious and elegant. There are 3 exits from the ground floor of the orphanage. Rose and the girl walk hand in hand to the door that connects the main building to the adjoining 2-story parking structure. An armed guard views their approach with more puzzlement than suspicion. The orphans are not permitted into the garage, even under supervision. When 21-21 holds out her tiny hand and says shake, the guard smiles and obliges, and receives the gift. Filled with cyclonic wonder, he sits shaking uncontrollably, weeping with joy but also with hard remorse, just as Rose had trembled and wept in the girl's room. It is a simple matter to push the button on the guard's console to throw the electronic lock on the door and pass through. Another guard waits on the garage side of the connecting door. He is startled by the sight of this child. She reaches for him, and his surprise at seeing her is nothing compared to the surprise that follows. A third guard is stationed at the gated exit from the garage. Alarmed by the sight of 21 to 21 in Rose's car, he leans in the open window to demand an explanation, and the girl touches his face. 2 more armed men staff the gate at the highway. All barriers fall, and Virginia lies ahead. Escape will never be as easy again. If they are apprehended, the girl's offer of a handshake will be greeted by gunfire. The trick now is to get out of the area quickly, before Project Security realizes what has happened to 5 of its men. They will mount a pursuit, perhaps with the assistance of local, state, and federal authorities. Rose drives madly, recklessly, with a skill born of desperation that she has never known before. Barely big enough to see out of the side window, 21 to 21 studies the passing countryside with fascination and, at last, says, "Wow, it sure is big out here." Rose laughs and says, "Honey, you ain't seen nothing yet." She realizes that she must get the word out as quickly as possible, use the media to display 21-21's healing powers, and then to demonstrate the greater gift that the girl can bestow. Only the forces of ignorance and darkness benefit from secrecy. Rose believes that 21 to 21 will never be safe until the world knows of her, embraces her, and refuses to allow her to be taken into custody. Her ex-bosses will expect her to go public quickly and in a big way. Their influence within the media is widespread yet as subtle as a web of cloud shadows on the skin of a pond, which makes it all the more effective. They will try to find her as soon as possible after she surfaces, and before she can bring 21 to 21 to the world. She knows a reporter whom she would trust not to betray her, Lisa Pecatone, an old college friend, who works at the Post in Los Angeles. Rose and the girl will have to fly to Southern California, and the sooner the better. Project 99 is a joint venture of private industry, elements of the defense establishment, and other powerful forces in the government. Easier to halt an avalanche with a feather than to resist their combined might, and they will shortly begin to use every asset in their arsenal to locate Rose and the girl. Trying to fly out of Dulles or National Airport in Washington is too dangerous. She considers Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. She chooses New York. She reasons that the more county and state line she crosses, the safer she becomes, so she drives to Hagerstown, Maryland, and from there to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, without incident. Yet mile by mile, she is increasingly concerned that her pursuers will have put out an AP on her car and that she will be captured regardless of the distance she puts between herself and Manassas. In Harrisburg, she abandons the car, and she and the girl continue to New York City by bus. By the time they are in the air aboard Nationwide Flight 353, Rose feels safe. Immediately on landing at LAX, she will be met by Lisa and the crew that Lisa has assembled, and the series of media eruptions will begin. For the airline passenger manifest, Rose implied that she was married to a white man, and she identified 21 to 21 as her stepdaughter, choosing the name Mary Tucker on the spur of the moment. With the media, she intends initially to use CC-21-21's project name, because its similarity to concentration camp inmates. Names will do more than anything else to characterize Project 99 in the public mind and generate instant sympathy for the child. She realizes that eventually, she will have to consult with 21 to 21 to pick a permanent name which, considering the singular historical importance of this child's life, should be a name that resonates. They are seated across the aisle from a mother and her 2 daughters, who are returning home to Los Angeles. Michelle, Chrissy, and Nina Carpenter. Nina, who is approximately 21-21's age and size, is playing with a handheld electronic game called Pigs and Princes, designed for preschoolers. From across the aisle, 21 becomes fascinated by the sounds and the images on the small screen. Seeing this, Nina asks Mary to move with her to a nearby pair of empty seats where they can play the game together. Rose is hesitant to allow this, but she knows that 21 is intelligent far beyond her years and is aware of the need for discretion, so she relents. This is the first unstructured playtime in 21-21's life, the first genuine play she has ever known. Nina is a child of enormous charm, sweet and gregarious. Although 21 is a genius with the reading skills of a college freshman, a healer with miraculous powers, and literally the hope of the world, she is soon enraptured by Nina, wants to be Nina, as totally cool as Nina, and unconsciously she begins imitating Nina's gestures and manner of speaking. Theirs is a late flight out of New York, and after a couple of hours, Nina is fading. She hugs 21-21, and with the permission of Michelle, she gives Pigs and Princes to her new friend before returning to sit with her mother and sister, where she falls asleep. Transported by delight, 21 returns to her seat beside Rose, hugging the small electronic game to her breast as though it is a treasure beyond value. Now she won't even play with it because she is afraid that she might break it, and she wants it to remain always, exactly as Nina gave it to her. West of the town of Running Lake, still many miles from Big Bear Lake, following ridgelines past the canyons where the wind was born, bombarded by thrashing conifers hurling cones at the pavement, Joe refused to consider the implications of Pigs and Princes. Listening to Rose tell the story, he had barely found sufficient self-control to repress his rage. He knew that he had no reason to be furious with this woman or with the child who had a concentration camp name, but he was livid nonetheless, perhaps because he knew how to function well in anger, as he had done throughout his youth, and not well at all in grief. Turning the subject away from little girls at play, he said, "How does Hortoneller fit into this aside from owning a big chunk of Technologic, which is deep in Project 99? Just that well-connected bastards like him are the wave of the future." She was holding the can of Pepsi between her knees, clawing at the pull tab with her right hand. She had barely enough strength and coordination to get it open. The wave of the future. Unless she changes everything. Big business, big government, and big media all one beast now, united to exploit the rest of us. Is that it? Radical talk. The aluminum can rattled against her teeth, and a trickle of Pepsi dribbled down her chin. Nothing but power matters to them. They don't believe in good and evil. There are only events. Though she had just taken a long swallow of Pepsi, her throat sounded dry. Her voice cracked. And what those events mean depends only on what spin you put on them. He remained blindly angry with her because of what she insisted that he believe about Nina, but he could not bear to glance at her again and see her growing weaker. He blinked at the road ahead, where showers of pine needles stitched together billowing sheets of dust, and he eased down on the accelerator, driving as fast as he dared. The soda can slipped out of her hand, dropped on the floor, and rolled under her seat, spilling the remainder of the Pepsi. "Losing it, Joe." "Not long now. Got to tell you how it was when the plane went in. 4 miles down, gathering speed all the way, engine shrieking, wings creaking, fuselage thrumming. Screaming passengers are pressed so hard into their seats by the accumulating gravities that many are unable to lift their heads, some praying, some vomiting, weeping, cursing, calling out the many names of God, calling out to loved ones present and far away. An eternity of plunging, 4 miles but as if from the moon minus And then Rose is in a blueness, a silent bright blueness, as if she is a bird in flight, except that no dark earth lies below, only blueness all around. No sense of motion. Neither hot nor cool. A flawless hyacinth blue sphere with her at the center. Suspended. Waiting. A deep breath held in her lungs. She tries to expel her stale breath but cannot, until minus. With an exhalation as loud as a shout, she finds herself in the meadow, still in her seat, stunned into immobility, 21 to 21 beside her. The nearby woods are on fire. On all sides, flames lick mounds of twisted debris. The meadow is an unspeakable charnel house. And the 747 is gone. At the penultimate moment, the girl had transported them out of the doomed aircraft, by a monumental exertion of her psychic gift, to another place, to a dimension outside of space and time, and had held them in that mysterious sheltering limbo through one terrible minute of cataclysmic destruction. The effort has left 21 to 21 cold, shaking, and unable to speak. Her eyes, bright with reflections of the many surrounding fires, have a faraway look like those of an autistic child. Initially she cannot walk or even stand, so Rose must lift her from the seat and carry her. Weeping for the dead scattered through the night, shuddering with horror at the carnage, wonderstruck by her survival, slammed by a hurricane of emotion, Rose stands with the girl cradled in her arms but is unable to take a single step. Then she recalls the flickering passenger cabin, lights and the spinning of the hands on her wristwatch, and she is certain that the pilot was the victim of a wet mission, remoted by the boy who lives in a steel capsule deep below the Virginia countryside. This realization propels her away from the crash site, around the burning trees, into the moonlit forest, wading through straggly underbrush, then along a deer trail powdered with silver light and dappled with shadow, to another meadow, to a ridge from which she sees the lights of Loose Change Ranch. By the time they reach the ranch house, the girl is somewhat recovered, but still not herself. She is able to walk now, but she is lethargic, brooding, distant. Approaching the house, Rose tells 21-21 to remember that her name is Mary Tucker, but 21 to 21 says, "My name is Nina. That's who I want to be." Those are the last words that she will speak, perhaps forever. In the months immediately following the crash, having taken refuge with Rose's friends in Southern California, the girl sleeps 12 to 14 hours a day. When she's awake, she shows no interest in anything. She sits for hours staring out a window, or at a picture in a storybook, or at nothing in particular. She has no appetite. Loses weight. She is pale and frail, and even her amethyst eyes seem to lose some of their color. Evidently, the effort required to move herself, and Rose into and out of the blue elsewhere, during the crash, has profoundly drained her, perhaps nearly killed her. Nina exhibits no paranormal abilities anymore, and Rose dwells in despondency. By Christmas, however, Nina begins to show interest in the world around her. She watches television. She reads books again. As the winter passes, she sleeps less and eats more. Her skin regains its former glow, and the color of her eyes deepens. She still does not speak, but she seems increasingly connected. Rose encourages her to come all the way back from her self-imposed exile by speaking to her every day about the good that she can do and the hope that she can bring to others. In a bureau drawer in the bedroom that she shares with the girl, Rose keeps a copy of the Los Angeles Post, the issue that devotes the entire front page, above the fold, to the fate of nationwide Flight 353. It helps to remind her of the insane viciousness of her enemies. One day in July, 11 months after the disaster, she finds Nina sitting on the edge of the bed with this newspaper open to a page featuring photographs of some of the victims of the crash. The girl is touching the photo of Nina Carpenter, who had given her pigs and princes, and she is smiling. Rose sits beside her and asks if she is feeling sad, remembering this lost friend. The girl shakes her head no. Then she guides Rose's hand to the photograph, and when Rose's fingertips touch the newsprint, she falls away into a blue brightness, not unlike the sanctuary into which she was transported in the instant before the plane crash, except that this is also a place full of motion, warmth, sensation. Clairvoyants have long claimed to feel a residue of psychic energy on common objects, left by the people who have touched them. Sometimes they assist police in the search for a murderer by handling objects worn by the victim at the time of the assault. This energy in the post photograph is similar but different, left not in passing by Nina but imbued in the newsprint by an act of will. Rose feels as if she has plunged into a sea of blue light, a sea crowded with swimmers whom she cannot see, but whom she feels gliding and swooping around her. Then one swimmer seems to pass through Rose and to linger in the passing, and she knows that she is with little Nina Carpenter, the girl with the lopsided smile, the giver of pigs and princes, who is dead and gone but safe, dead and gone but not lost forever, happy and alive in an elsewhere beyond the swarming blue brightness, which is not really a place itself, but an interface between phases of existence. Moved almost as deeply as she had been when she was first given the knowledge of the afterlife, in the room at the orphanage, Rose withdraws her hand from the photo of Nina Carpenter and sits silently for a while, humbled. Then she takes her own Nina into her arms and holds the girl tightly and rocks her, neither capable of speaking nor in need of words. Now that this special girl's power is being reborn, Rose knows what they must do, where they must start their work. She does not want to risk going to Lisa Pecatone again. She doesn't believe that her old friend knowingly betrayed her, but she suspects that through Lisa's link to the Post, and through the Post to Horton Neller, the people at Project 99 learned of her presence on Flight 353. While Rose and Nina are believed dead, they need to take advantage of their ghostly status to operate as long as possible without drawing the attention of their enemies. First, Rose asks the girl to give the great gift of eternal truth to each of the friends who has sheltered them during these 11 months in their emotional wilderness. Then they will contact the husbands and wives and parents and children of those who perished on Flight 353, bringing them both the received knowledge of immortality and visions of their loved ones at the blue interface. With luck, they will spread their message so widely by the time they are discovered that it cannot be contained. Rose intends to start with Joe Carpenter, but she can't locate him. His co-workers at the Post have lost track of him. He has sold the house in Studio City. He has no listed phone. They say he is a broken man. He has gone away to die. She must begin the work elsewhere. Because the Post published photographs of only a fraction of the Southern California victims, and because she has no easy way to gather photos of the many others, Rose decides not to use portraits, after all. Instead, she tracks down their burial places through published funeral service notices, and she takes snapshots of their graves. It seems fitting that the imbued image should be of a headstone, that these grim memorials of bronze and granite should become doorways through which the recipients of the pictures will learn that death is not mighty and dreadful, that beyond this bitter phase, death himself dies. High in the wind-churned mountains, with waves of moon-silvered conifers casting sprays of needles onto the roadway, still more than 20 miles from Big Bear Lake, Rose Tucker spoke so softly that she could barely be heard over the racing engine and the hum of the tires. "Joe, will you hold my hand?" He could not look at her, would not look at her, dared not even glance at her for a second, because he was overcome by the childish superstition that she would be all right, perfectly fine, as long as he didn't visually confirm the terrible truth that he heard in her voice. But he looked. She was so small, slumped in her seat, leaning against the door, the back of her head, against the window, as small to his eyes as 21 to 21 must have appeared to her when she had fled Virginia with the girl at her side. Even in the faint glow from the instrument panel, her huge and expressive eyes were again as compelling as they had been when he'd first met her in the graveyard, full of compassion and kindness and a strange glimmering joy that scared him. His voice was shakier than hers. "It's not far now." "Too far," she whispered. "Just hold my hand." "Oh, shit. It's all right, Joe." The shoulder of the highway widened to a scenic rest area. He stopped the car before a vista of darkness, the hard night sky, the icy disk of a moon that seemed to shed cold instead of light, and a vast blackness of trees, and rocks and canyons descending. He released his seat belt, leaned across the console, and took her hand. Her grip was weak. "She needs you, Joe." "I'm nobody's hero, Rose. I'm nothing." "You need to hide her. Hide her away." Rose minus. Give her time. For her power to grow. "I can't save anyone. I shouldn't have started the work so soon. The day will come when she won't be so vulnerable. Hide her away. Let her power grow. She'll know. When the time has come." She began to lose her grip on him. He covered her hand with both of his, held it fast, would not let it slip from his grasp. Voice rattling away, she seemed to be receding from him though. She did not move. Open your heart to her, Joe." Her eyelids fluttered. "Rose, please don't." "It's all right. Please. Don't. See you later, Joe. Please. See you." Then he was alone in the night. He held her small hand, alone in the night while the wind played a hollow threnody. When at last he was able to do so, he kissed her brow. The directions Rose had given him were easy to follow. The cabin was neither in the town of Big Bear Lake nor elsewhere along the lake front, but higher on the northern slopes and nestled deep in pines and birches. The cracked and potholed blacktop led to a dirt driveway, at the end of which was a small, white clapboard house with a shake shingle roof. A green Jeep Wagoneer stood beside the cabin. Joe parked behind the Jeep. The cabin boasted a deep, elevated porch on which 3 cane-backed rocking chairs were arranged side by side. A handsome black man, tall and athletically built, stood at the railing, his ebony skin highlighted with a brass tint cast by 2 bare, yellow light bulbs in the porch ceiling. The girl waited at the head of the flight of 4 steps that led up from the driveway to the porch. She was blonde and about 6 years old. From under the driver's seat, Joe retrieved the gun that he had taken from the white-haired storyteller after the scuffle on the beach. Getting out of the car, he tucked the weapon under the waistband of his jeans. The wind shrieked and hissed through the needled teeth of the pines. He walked to the foot of the steps. The child had descended 2 of the 4 treads. She stared past Joe at the ford. She knew what had happened. On the porch, the black man began to cry. The girl spoke for the first time in over a year since the moment outside the Ealings ranch house when she had told Rose that she wanted to be called Nina. Gazing at the car, she said only one word in a voice, soft and small, "Mother." Her hair was the same shade as Nina's hair. She was as fine-boned as Nina. But her eyes were not gray like Nina's eyes, and no matter how hard Joe tried to see Nina's face before him, he could not deceive himself into believing that this was his daughter. Yet again, he had been engaged in searching behavior, seeking what was lost forever. The moon above was a thief, its glow not a radiance of its own, but a weak reflection of the sun. And like the moon, this girl was a thief, not Nina but only a reflection of Nina, shining not with Nina's brilliant light, but with a pale fire. Regardless of whether she was only a lab-born mutant with strange mental powers, or really the hope of the world, Joe hated her at that moment, and hated himself for hating her, but hated her nonetheless. 5. Hot wind huffed at the windows, and the cabin smelled of pine, dust, and the black char from last winter's cozy blazes, which coated the brick walls of the big fireplace. The incoming electrical lines had sufficient slack to swing in the wind. From time to time they slapped against the house, causing the lights to throb and flicker. Each tremulous brownout reminded Joe of the pulsing lights at the Delman house, and his skin prickled with dread. The owner was the tall black man who had broken into tears on the porch. He was Louis Tucker, Mahalia's brother, who had divorced Rose 18 years ago when she proved unable to have children. She had turned to him in her darkest hour. And after all this time, though he had a wife and children whom he loved, Louis clearly still loved Rose too. "If you really believe she's not dead, that she's only moved on," Joe said coldly, "why cry for her?" "I'm crying for me," said Louis. "Because she's gone from here, and I'll have to wait through a lot of days to see her again." 2 suitcases stood in the front room, just inside the door. They contained the belongings of the child. She was at a window, staring out at the ford, with sorrow pulled around her like sackcloth. "I'm scared," Louis said. "Rose was going to stay up here with Nina, but I don't think it's safe now. I don't want to believe it could be true, but they might have found me before I got out of the last place with Nina. Couple times, way back, I thought the same car was behind us. Then it didn't keep up. They don't have to. With their gadgets, they can follow from miles away. And then just before you pulled into the driveway, I went out onto the porch 'cause I thought I heard a helicopter. Up in these mountains in this wind, does that make sense?" "You better get her out of here," Joe agreed. As the wind slapped the electrical lines against the house, Louis paced to the fireplace and back, a hand pressed to his forehead as he tried to put the loss of Rose out of his mind long enough to think what to do. "I figured you and Rose. Well, I thought the 2 of you were taking her. And if they're on to me, then won't she be safer with you?" "If they're on to you," Joe said, "then none of us is safe here, now anymore. There's no way out." The line slapped the house, and the lights pulsed, and Louis walked to the fireplace and picked up a battery-powered, long-necked, butane match from the hearth. The girl turned from the window, eyes wide, and said, "No." Louis Tucker flicked the switch on the butane match, and blue flame spurted from the nozzle. Laughing, he set his own hair on fire, and then his shirt. "Nina!" Joe cried. The girl ran to his side. The stink of burning hair spread through the room. Ablaze, Louis moved to block the front door. From the waistband of his jeans, Joe drew the pistol, aimed but couldn't pull the trigger. This man confronting him was not really Louis Tucker now, it was the boy thing, reaching out 3,000 miles from Virginia. And there was no chance that Louis would regain control of his body and live through this night. Yet Joe hesitated to squeeze off a shot, because the moment that Louis was dead, the boy would remote someone else. The girl was probably untouchable, able to protect herself with her own paranormal power. So the boy would use Joe and the gun in Joe's hand to shoot the girl point blank in the head. "This is fun," the boy said in Louis' voice as flames seethed off his hair, as his ears charred and crackled, as his forehead and cheeks blistered. "Fun," he said, enjoying his ride inside Louis Tucker, but still blocking the exit to the porch. Maybe, at the instant of greatest jeopardy, Nina could send herself into that safe bright blueness as she had done, just before the 747 plowed into the meadow. Maybe the bullets fired at her would merely pass through the empty air where she had been. But there was a chance that she was still not fully recovered, that she wasn't yet able to perform such a taxing feat, or even that she could perform it, but would be mortally drained by it this time. "Out the back!" Joe shouted. Go, go.